we also have to talk about Shane McMahon. The photo seen around the world. So Fightful and WrestleTalk did a joint report, and WrestleTalk had this photo that was circulated of Tony Khan looking like he's been mysteriously caught on camera, and Shane, who doesn't look like he has any care in the world that this photo gets out and circulated. And Fightful added that this apparently took place, this meeting, at a private airport in Arlington, Texas, where, of course, that's where AEW is holding their residency. And this was done at an airport on Monday, and just stating that they were there to discuss possibilities moving forward. Now, my question to you, Wei, is not even so much of like what becomes of this. What is the value of this if you are both sides of the coin here? If you are AEW / Tony Khan, and what is your value if you are Shane McMahon? Like, obviously, like, I'm not going to guess like what their thinking was, but this photo got out, and I don't think it was, they posed for a photo here. Like, there is certainly some gamesmanship involved here, but what is to gain from either party by working together?
Well, first I want to talk about this photo, because I feel like a lot of the suspicion at this point, I haven't spoken about this with you, but I'm sensing from your tone of voice, and maybe just from what I've heard, is that this feels like it's an attempt to leak, to stage a leak, and to stage a candid photograph. And I just want to even try to unpack that, like let's just speculate that even could be the case. Like, what was the direction, behind from the photographer about this, and what was the direction from Shane?
Tony, look more nervous, look more surprised. Like, Shane, just do your thing. This is my surprised face if I'm Shane McMahon.
It's that. It's also like, I mean, let's say this was, completely, I don't know, a ninja took this photo. Yeah, like, you'd figure they would just snap a picture by like peeking the camera lens just barely through the crack of the door and like, taking the photo without them noticing. This felt like it was somebody deliberately knocking on the door saying, smile for the camera, and then flash, and then like getting these two, like, this is all just to say, I think people should have a reason to be suspicious, because number one, this is professional wrestling, and anything that generates any sort of discussion is something that you can, perhaps consider to be marketing. And just the idea that these two somehow in this private room were to just get caught and both turn their head towards looking at the camera, and then this suddenly being released on a Wednesday, again, it's more than enough reason for us to, I think, be suspicious. But so what, right? This is professional wrestling. Does it spark enough interest to get us excited about what might be to come here? And that goes towards maybe your question, John. What does each side have to gain? Well, I think, for AEW, we've seen Tony seems to love these type of publicity stunts. He seems to be at this point in a place where I think he's just looking for any sort of conversation about AEW. I mean, mostly, hopefully positive, but just the type of conversation that I think will reach outside of the usual audience that tunes into Dynamite every single week. And I think this is one of those, the prospect of a McMahon joining the rival, company. And that alone might be enough, for him to want to consider doing something here. Again, it's to attract an audience that might not be watching AEW right now. Doesn't necessarily mean they're watching the WWE, but just, doing something big enough to just get people to pay attention to what's going on in AEW. And for Shane McMahon, I think that answer is kind of obvious. He didn't leave this, his last showing in professional wrestling with very, with his
quads in check.
He did not leave with his quads in check, no. And knowing him at his age, wanting to, just reach for that next adrenaline high. And certainly, I think he probably has some sort of ego within himself where he wants to be able to show that, hey, I'm no longer part of my dad's company. I went out looking, like a guy who shouldn't be in the ring. I want to reclaim my image. I want to have a great send-off the way like a Steve Borden was able to have. And where's the best place I can go? It's AEW. What do you think?
So I look at it and I think to to your point, I think Tony Khan is looking for anything that's going to, I think we know that in Tony Khan, anything that is going to generate exactly what you and I are engaging in right now is considered just, it's just you're pumping energy into the AEW speculation game, and hopefully that would lead to people like tuning in just for the idea, is Shane McMahon going to show up? I think it's one of those would get a great pop. I more so look at it as though it's for a lot of people that probably are not following even pro wrestling, that just the idea of a McMahon on this competitor's programming, anyone can understand that in terms of this like palace intrigue that people have of this, you know, a McMahon that's showing up on the other networks programming. I don't know if there's a whole lot of value beyond that, but I mean, AEW has made a lot other signings that don't get half that level of interest. And if Shane comes in, sure, you could have a role for him. I can understand why right now they're looking for all these different things, and this probably is beneficial to both. I think Shane wants his name and face out there, and you'd be blind not to look at this as like a subtle hint from Shane about, like, I'm sure if he had his priority, it would be back in WWE if he's going to do something with wrestling. And by doing this, I mean, this is quite the statement in and of itself, just meeting with Tony Khan and this becoming, just something that I think non-wrestling people might focus on just because of the last name being McMahon. As, redundant as that may be, that's going to grab some people's attention of just a McMahon showing up in another company.
It's his path towards achieving some form of relevance in this industry, which he has had none of, and continues to have none of, the further his father is away from this business, right? So, I mean, what becomes of this at this point? I feel the discussion is probably enough, if it wasn't already a planned thing and that this was just all marketing. I feel this sort of discussion and this sort of like response has been enough for Tony to like seriously consider it. What do you think are the negatives of doing something like this?
I don't think Shane would be a cheap hire. I mean, this is somebody that has, throughout this whole return that he had back in 2016, he had divested himself of all of his WWE stock, and at a time when the stock was a fraction of what it would become. I mean, it was that would be a tough one for me to swallow, seeing at what that stock grew into, and you sold it like around 2009 or so, when it was just
that would hurt.
Yeah, like that's one when you're talking like a stock that was like under $20 at that period, and it would grow to be well over 100 during some of those peak periods. But regardless,
you can't predict the market.
You cannot predict the market, and he did not. But anyway, that is to say, like there's nothing really holding him from this. But I still feel it would be costly for AEW if I was a performer in AEW. Is the idea of Shane McMahon coming in for, not just significant money, but you have to justify that money and have him in a significant spot, even if it's in a, part-time role. I don't know. I've always kind of underestimated the appeal that Shane McMahon has had with people, that when he came back in 2016, I mean, that was a huge reaction he got, and I've always thought it's a short-term thing you can do with Shane. I never found him to be that dynamic of a performer, but there's clearly an interest, and I think the novelty of Shane in AEW, you will be able to coast on that for a period. But you are like, how is it branding AEW? I mean, is it good publicity you're getting? Is it just attention for the sake of attention because of this? And I just think a lot of people look at AEW and are trying to understand what the vision is of this company and trying to understand what it was. And I would say that at the start, you clearly had that identity, and your identity is going to change over time. That's inevitable. And this would be another one, like a McMahon being, a prominent figure on your show. Is that good or bad over the long term?
Yeah. For me, I think it's all.
It also attaches you in a weird way to Vince McMahon too, which is, I know it's his son. There's nothing against his son, but it does, put it does invite, if you want this guy out there in front of media and stuff, like you are, it is the son of Vince McMahon, and he's a pretty troubled, toxic figure at the moment.
Sure. But that shouldn't disqualify his son from, being employed by another company.
It doesn't, but he's there because he is Vince McMahon's son.
He would be asked a question like that if he is at a press conference, or at least you would hope, right? So I think it's all well and good for like Tony to engage in these publicity stunts like once in a while, but I think they always have to have some sort of eye towards long-term storytelling and really a long-term benefit for a company rather than just that 1 week spike. So for me,
Shane against Darby Allin.
I mean, I'm sure that is a number one demand for a lot of audiences, but why? I mean, you can understand why, but I just also remember that one of the participants in that equation is 50 something years old and just came back from tearing a quad without doing a whole lot. So I don't know how many of those dream matches I want to see from Shane, but like Shane, I actually quite enjoyed when he was just playing SmackDown general manager as a straight on babyface with Bryan Danielson, and I feel like as a manager type of role, as maybe even an authority figure type of role, like he could do a decent job. With the occasional match, as well that you could bill for a pay-per-view, I think there's some attraction there. Again, it comes down to story. It comes down to like the type of character they could have for him. The type, like what sort of talents he could get over. Can you imagine a Shane McMahon, Kazuchika Okada pairing?
None of this is exciting to me. None of this is intriguing to me, and I don't.
I just
like.
Is
that a television match that might draw some novelty? Perhaps.
I'm not saying a match. I'm saying a mouthpiece and
I see. I understand what you mean.
Tandem. Yes.
Yeah. Listen, it's all in what you deem as the attention you are seeking. Like this will grab you attention for sure, and I think that was evidenced today. But it's it's one that it's not like a stunning one to me either. If you look at just, the way that things were, trickling out over the past month, and the idea of these two meeting is not shocking that these two would have a meeting. And I think this was, if anything, this is like kicking the tires to kind of generate and see what that level of interest is, and if they pursue things further.
Tires have been kicked.
There you go. Yeah.